actually, before I do that, I want to give a really big thank you to my team behind the scenes, Michael Espinoza and Malsri Jaha. I don't think I would be able to do this without them. So please give them my huge thanks. So your presentations, I sent you some emails over the last few weeks regarding order and evaluation matrix. And first off, before we start the presentations, I really want to introduce our guests tonight. And they are my colleagues and my friends, really. First off, we have Commissioner Joanne Hardesty of the Portland City Council. And I think I told Joanne this when we came on, is that I always share how I meet her. And I remember meeting Joanne at a transportation justice, none other, session that was put together by Fourth, and Climate Solutions was there, and there was so many transportation advocates within the community, those from Opano and everyone else. And Joanne sat in front of me. This lady sat in front of me. I didn't know who she was. I was kind of new to I feel like my space at least. And I was like, she turned around and she gave me her pamphlet. She said my name, and she shook my hand and she said, "My name is Joanne Hardesty. I'm running for city council." There you are.
And here I am. Yes.
There you are.
Well, first, okay. I'm sorry.
I'm done. The floor is yours right now.
I really appreciated hearing that story because, I meet a lot of people, and I love it when people walk up and say, "Where do we meet?" Right? And I'm just supposed to remember it right off the bat. So I really appreciate you sharing that story up front. And thank you for having me at your last class and having me listen to your presentations tonight. I got to tell you, what a great time to be thinking innovatively about transportation and what that means in a city that wants to be vibrant, wants to be equitable, and wants to make sure that every corner of the city has access to quality, affordable public transit when they need it, in the way that they need it. And so, needless to say, even with the great, fabulous work of PBOT under Chris Warner's leadership, we're not there yet. But we're a lot further along now than we were when we met way back when. That feels like a lifetime ago, but it was actually less than 3 years ago that we met. And so it just goes to show that even though all of us are dealing with all the crises that are happening in our world right now, with the pandemic, with the economic collapse that we're currently in, with the demand for a racially just community that doesn't kill people who are sick or Black or poor. And last but not least, we had that little wildfire thing that took over around the 4th of July holiday season. And so we have a lot of major issues at the city of Portland that we will be confronting in the next few years. But one of the key things that we have to get right is making sure that transportation continues to be accessible and affordable and green, and that we are making sure that we are reducing our carbon emissions and that we are exceeding the goals that we've set as far as our climate action plan has laid out. As Commissioner Fritz would say if she was here, we're on fire, right? And we've got to act like we're in a climate emergency, because if we don't act like it, we won't actually pass policies that actually further what our goals are. And so I think I will stop there. I look forward to hearing your presentations this evening, and maybe we'll have a chance to have some additional conversations about how we take a vision and an opportunity, because every crisis gives us an opportunity to rethink where we are and where we're headed. And so I look forward to hearing your presentations and see what brilliant ideas you have that we can then implement at the City of Portland. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And our next guest is Director Chris Warner. And I think I just run into him at coffee shops, but we're just on Zoom calls now.
Exactly.
Chris, I'd like to give you the floor to talk about some of the fantastic work you're doing at the Bureau.
Sure.
And yeah.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here virtually with you all tonight. I've done this class for many, many years, and I always look forward to it. So I'm very excited to see the projects you've developed. I think what I want to really do is figure out what you've learned over the past semester. This class really is one of the pillars of Portland's community-driven transportation ecosystem. Having so many engaged and well-informed community advocates is one of the reasons that Portland is a leader in forward-thinking transportation initiatives. By advocating for your community needs, you really have a direct role and to give us the direction that PBOT needs in order to move on where we need to go for the community. And really now more than ever, as the commissioner was saying, we really need robust community input because we are facing some very significant challenges. This past 8 months or so, we really have been really in this whirlwind of this ongoing pandemic. And this challenge to our transportation system, really what we're trying to do is figure out the best way for people to get from place to place. And what we've really kind of been focused on is how we emerge from the pandemic. We want to really take the challenges that we've had and repair the damage, number one, for what we've had, but also figure out what lessons we learned from the pandemic. For example, could the widespread use of teleworking, could that be a way to address our congestion and to make gains on shrinking our carbon footprint? Those are some of the questions that we're asking ourselves. We also need to really build and expand the energy on this summer's movement for racial justice. At PBOT, we are really reckoning with how transportation has in the past contributed to the inequities in Portland. And we're really trying to ensure that we don't make the same mistakes and instead build a transportation system that follows the basic principle of what we call transportation justice. And we try to influence that through all of our work. My hope is, as you participate in this class, it is really the first chapter of your long story of advocating for a safer, more sustainable transportation system here in Portland. I would encourage you to take the insights you've gained here and participate on your neighborhood level organizations. I'd also like to encourage you to think about joining a PBOT committee. We have many opportunities in that respect, including our main Bureau Budget and Advisory Committee. We're recruiting for this and other committees in the next year. Please visit our website and join our email list. This is a great way to stay informed about our committees and the other opportunities to really serve not only the Bureau, but to serve the entire city of Portland. Again, thanks for being here. I'm excited to take a look at the projects and thanks for having me tonight.
Thank you, Director. Our next guest, and you've heard from Erin before, is the Director of PSU in the Urban Planning Studio program, and it's Erin Golub. And Erin, unless you want to say something, I know the students have met you at the beginning. If you have a few words you can share. If not, then we can move on with presentations.
No, I think we should just jump into the presentations. I'm super excited. I remember last year they were really, really cool. And as many of you know, we've been doing this course for many, many years. So every year is like opening a new box of chocolates. So looking forward to seeing what people came up with.
Thank you, thank you. And I told our commissioner that it's been long going. This is the 30th year anniversary, and I was gonna do some sort of a party for us, but it didn't happen. But it may happen, I don't know. The year's still a couple of weeks away. But without further ado, I want to get started with presentations. We put together a matrix, a review matrix, and I sent it over to Erin, Commissioner Hardesty, and also Chris. And
I didn't get it actually. Michael just sent me one, and I'm trying to open it in Sheet. So
okay.
Yes, I didn't get it either. I've just asked Michael to email it to me directly.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. And Malchi, do you know if there's a setting where they're having trouble accessing it?
It says I need permission when I click it. Michael just sent me something, but it says I need permission in order to open it.
I think Mallory, that email.
If I can give you access to the folder, then you can just put it from there or make changes there directly. So let me do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I got it okay on the chat, and I got in. So
Okay.
just to let you know.
Okay. Well, if it's let's try it. I know we have a good 2 hours, so if it doesn't work out, that's okay too. I really just would love for you to sit back and also listen to the presentation. So let's get started with our first presenter, which is Ashley Lopez, and she's going to talk about the safety of East Davis and Northeast 60th Avenue. Malsri, would you be able to bring up the presentation? And Ashley, I will give you the floor so you can present.
Yeah, I'll just do that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So I actually changed my project because I noticed that PBOT was actually already doing improvements on the intersection I had initially sought out to do my project. So instead, I am doing, this is what I call the 6-point nightmare. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, so my name is Ashley Lopez, and I used to, pre-COVID, go through this intersection twice a day to commute to downtown for work, and it was probably the worst part of my day, both of those times. So we can go to the next slide. So this is the view of Southeast Ankeny Street, crossing Sandy Boulevard. This is from a bicyclist perspective. So a bicyclist would be where that arrow is, but the pedestrians crossing would be a little bit before and after where the bikes would pass through. Just a little glimpse in case you've never biked through the street. Next slide, please. So just a little background about Southeast Ankeny Street. I pulled this from PBOT's website. So it's a very popular neighborhood greenway. It's a biking route that goes adjacent to Burnside Street with over 2,000 people biking along the route per day. Ankeny is classified as a neighborhood greenway, and it's a street that prioritizes bicycling and has design features that encourage walking. So just a fun little map of some neighborhood greenways in the east side of Portland. Next slide, please. So my high-tech map here, and I have a key on the bottom. In case it's cut off on your screen, the orange arrows indicate vehicle traffic, and yellow would be bicycle traffic, and the green would be foot traffic. So it's all very specific to Sandy Boulevard. So I feel like this intersection is an issue for all parties involved. So for vehicles, for bikes, and for pedestrians. So personally, as someone who has drove my vehicle down, this street is Northeast 12th that then turns into Sandy, and it's a 2-lane road. And then right after you pass Burnside, the left lane turns into a left turn only lane, which then the vehicle can make a left onto Southeast Ankeny or 11th Avenue. So for me personally, I was caught off guard. I don't really drive, so it was a little confusing, overwhelming. But as a bicyclist, I'm unsure if cars know that or what, but if you were a bicycle on the west side of the street on Ankeny, you'll be waiting to go. You think it's clear because there's no one in the lane going straight, but then everyone at the last minute will change lanes. So that I feel like is a safety issue. And I'm not sure if cars are just merging in that fashion, or if they were like me and caught off guard and not knowing that it will become a 1-lane street after you pass Ankeny Street. And bike traffic, so I noted the green lines. That's where pedestrians cross. Bicycles are the yellow lines. So if you're a biker, I feel like you're kind of disregarded because the green arrows I drew are over the white pedestrian, what is it called? Crossing paints. Next slide, please. So just some things I've noticed. I actually recently got caught up in a car on this intersection. So I realized that there's a lot of arrows. There's a lot of, the lanes have similar markings, although 200, 300 feet from this section, they're quite different. So there's 2 straight arrows on each lane before East Burnside Street. And so my solution to educate cars about the lane turning is to somehow let drivers know that it'll be a left turn only lane in X amount of feet. And next slide, please. And they also have these signs posted on East Burnside Street. So both lanes are kind of curving because this is where Northeast 12 turns into Sandy. But somehow also indicating on the sign that that would be a left turn only lane. Next slide, please. And here it is, the sign, but the sign comes 220 feet before the Southeast Ankeny Street, which is the left turn. So through traffic merge right. I feel like there could be maybe a sign before East Burnside indicating 1 lane only after X amount of feet, just to give drivers a heads up. Next slide, please. And as I said before, the pedestrian crossings are quite far from where the bikes cross. So my solution for bicycle safety would be to add a flashing beacon to alert vehicles that there are pedestrians and bikes crossing, so shown in the bottom picture there. And then to add some green paint to let vehicles know that there are bikes crossing Sandy. So I know there are little boxes kind of by the island. Sorry, I don't have a picture up, but maybe we could do a little bit more there. Next slide, please. So I reached out to PBOT, and good news was that this intersection is already on their radar. And I got this map sent to me. So the blue dashed lines indicate pedestrian crossings, and the yellow lines are the signalized approaches. So the new signals would operate as such, reference red and blue numbers. So they're gonna create a pattern to have an easier flow of traffic in the intersection. So phase 4 and 8 would go together, allowing east and west bike and car traffic and pedestrians to cross. Phase 2 and 6 would go together, allowing northeast and southwest bike and car traffic on Sandy, as well as pedestrian crossings. And then phase 1 would go to allow left turns from Sandy. So PBOT employee told me that this project is in design phase currently. Next slide, please. So I asked him what the PBOT process was, and what does that really mean? What's design phase? Like, when will you reach out to community before the design phase is finalized? I think you forgot to answer that part in my email, so I'm not sure, but these would be my questions for PBOT going forward. So I know that Southeast Ankeny is pretty popular for commuting. I live out in East Portland, and I know I go through that. So I'm kind of wondering, how will PBOT engage bikers and pedestrians who use the bus, who frequent this intersection? Like, how are they going to reach those people, especially now during COVID? People are not commuting as much. What types of street lighting and street crossing is PBOT looking into, especially for the safety of people with dark skin? And how will the crossing accommodate for the disabled community and blind and deaf communities? So these would be my questions I have for PBOT going forward in their project. And that's my presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. I want to give some time for any questions for Ashley.
Can I just say something real quick? I shared the evaluation matrix with the reviewers. So
I got it.
Okay, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I guess I would start. This sound weird, but this is really spooky because I go through this intersection almost daily. And I thought about that actually when you're coming across towards East Burnside and those signs up there. I literally thought about it this morning when I was coming through there because that intersection has been something that is evolved over time. And it's one of those intersections that's really tough because it's Burnside and Sandy and Ankeny all coming together. So we have kind of these seams sometimes in the transportation system that there really aren't that many easy answers, but I think it's one where we'll continue to evolve and hopefully, in terms of as you're coming across Burnside towards Ankeny, we did put in the dedicated left-hand turn probably a couple of years ago, and that has actually helped because one of the things that even though we could probably do a better job in terms of making sure that people don't merge over, because one of the things would happen is if both lanes went straight, and so with both lanes going straight onto Sandy, from Sandy onto 7th, that really made for dangerous because we're really worried about kind of the double threat in terms of two cars there. So that has actually helped having the one lane veer off onto 11th. So yeah, this is an intersection that is on all of our radar screen in terms of how do we really take all of those fabrics of our transportation system that actually come together in one little spot. It is many years ago when we did the couplet with the Burnside Cooch couplet that added to the complexity of that intersection. It used to be even wilder in terms of more cars coming in there. So we've shredded it down a little bit. So thanks for identifying it because it is one of those kind of famous intersections that is kind of on the scene.
Yeah, thank you.
And I would just say, as soon as you pulled up that intersection, I was like, it is my horror intersection. And normally because I am trying to get from Ankeny on to Burnside, and so depending upon what time of day that is, you could take your life into your own hands, just trying to be a good community partner, waiting for the opportunity to make that turn so that you could then go up into East Portland on Burnside. It's never been easy, but I can tell you that over the last 5 years, and I suspect Chris would agree, with the increase in multi-family apartment complexes in that area, with that huge increase of housing, the transportation that intersection no longer serves actually the community that used to be there 5 years ago, right? All of a sudden you've got thousands of more people trying to make those little maneuvers respectfully as they can, and I couldn't agree more that that's an intersection. I don't do it every day, but the times that I've gone, it really is it's an exercise in patience, trying to get to make that turn. So thank you for actually bringing that one up, because that one would be on my list as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, definitely. It's an exercise in patience. I like that. That's a good one. That's true. Aaron, do you have any comments, or would?
No, it was interesting. I used the intersection. I've not seen any major issues, but I know that it's for advanced riders only. So, and that's not fair. So I'm glad it's going to be more widely approachable by a wider range of riders. Great.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Ashley. Next up is Byron Palmer. And Maltri, if you can bring up Byron's presentation, he will talk on self-policing streets. I'm very interested in hearing this.
The last presentation was very interesting. I used to ride through that intersection, and I felt like I was taking my life in my hands. I tend to be fearless, and so I can't imagine anyone who is afraid to be on a bicycle out in traffic would be able to even go through there. My project topic is the concept of self-policing streets, by which I mean the use of automatic systems for issuing citations for speeding and other infractions, mainly red light violations. Currently, we have a number of red light cameras and a number of speed cameras in Portland. They're a very small number. We actually went to the legislature and got more in the past 6 years or so. But this is really a kind of a stretch goal because nothing like this has really been implemented in the US. There's been an increase in speed cameras in some places, but it has not been really widely adopted. The problems, next slide. The problems that I see is that one, traffic enforcement has decreased. There are fewer officers actually doing traffic enforcement. There's problems with equity, with traffic stops by police tending to favor certain segments of the population. And partially the police have pulled back from enforcement because of this bias and because of other things. So enforcement has decreased. The second problem that I see from lack of enforcement is our bicycle goals are not being reached. Bike share is stagnant. It has not increased for some time. We are not considered a world-class city. By the way, citations went from 1,200 last November to 500, a little over 500 for this November. Mode share has stagnated and Portland is no longer leading as a bicycle city. Issues with climate change are not being addressed. We have a big goal to reach a high level of bike mode share, and that we don't seem to be making any progress. People feel unsafe biking. The average risk of death for someone, pedestrian or bicyclist, reaches 10% at an impact speed of 23 miles an hour, 25% at 32, 50% at 42, and 75% at 50. So keeping people down at 20 gives us a chance of actually living. Next slide. Self-policing streets. What we would be doing is add speed monitors to cite speeding vehicles. My idea would be a small and movable to target specific areas, being able to move to a new area as time goes on. We would need an easier method for issuing tickets. It's shown to be effective in reducing the speed. I believe that the responsibility should be shifted to PBOT rather than the police, treating citations like parking violations rather than forcing stops and removing that particular bias. Automated things are less biased, except for maybe the placement. And then another side would be to improve the citizen citation process. And I have a long list of things to do there, but that's not what this is all about. Next slide, please. Some of the problems that one might imagine might be technology. Currently, the big problem with technology is the cost is still fairly high, and they could be made smaller and more portable than they currently are. I didn't check in Europe. I suspect that they're a little bit better in Europe. The law needs to be changed is the big problem because currently speed citations have to be reviewed by the police, and they need to have, the Portland Police Bureau to issue the citations. It's easy to get out of a citation. You just claim you're not the driver or it's a commercial vehicle and you're basically exempt. The citation is issued to the if we made the law so that the citation was issued to the vehicle owner, like a parking ticket, that would work, and allow a lot more radar stations, as well as red light cameras. Federal restrictions on the use of funds for automated enforcement is a minor problem. And finally, citizen acceptance. Next slide, please. In terms of equity considerations, talked a fair amount about this, and the placement of the sensors need to take into consideration the population that lives there, as well as the drive-through population. Placement should be concentrated on streets where speeding is more of a problem. And because I think that this is, my idea is directed toward bike share, this would be on neighborhood greenways, rather than targeting the major streets such as Division and Powell. I think those need different approaches. I think that there needs to be consultation with the local community to help in selecting enforcement areas. And I think that we can scale the fines to income wealth level of the offender and have a traffic school as an out. Next slide. My suggestions for implementation is to ensure community involvement in the selection of the locations, that citations are issued to the vehicle, not the driver, like parking, make fines scalable to the income, speed, and frequency of the violation, target the streets for walking and bicycling, use non-police personnel for issuing the citation, lower the threshold level from 10 miles an hour over the limit to 5 miles an hour over the limit, just given the fact that going from 20 to 30 miles an hour, you almost double the risk of a serious injury to someone, and install a large number of fixed locations. It has been done in Europe where they have a lot of fixed locations, but they only have a small number of actual cameras working, and they just move them around. So you never know when you're driving down the street whether that station is going to be active or not, or just move them as very portable. And that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Byron. Viewers, what are your comments?
So I'm actually curious, Brian, about one of your statements that the police have pushed back from issuing citations because of bias. What is that based on?
I have to say that that's probably more anecdotal from various comments that have been reported in the media. I haven't heard anything directly, so
yeah,
take it with a grain of salt.
I did, and that's why I asked that question, because I would push back on that as a reason why police have backed away from citations. We would like to believe it's because they recognize the bias and how traffic stops happen, but based on my lived experience, I don't believe that's true. You'll be happy to know that as part of our legislative agenda, we are trying to get the legislature to remove the requirement that a police officer has to review the footage of a red light camera or other device like that. And so hopefully we'll be able to get that through in the next legislative session. I know Commissioner Udaley was really excited about pushing to see if we could actually change that function from police to PBOT, and not knowing who the next commissioner will be. I do know that it's certainly something that the mayor and I and Commissioner Udaley have talked about. So I'll leave that there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I only add a couple of things. We have seen on the places where we have the fixed speed cameras, we have seen a reduction in the speeds in those areas. We've been fairly judicious in terms of using it because of we don't want to impact community more than we should. So we're trying to be sensitive to that, but also trying to weigh where the most dangerous streets are. In terms of weighing them at the same time. So yeah, we're excited to see what happens down at the legislature in terms of giving us some additional opportunities and additional tools as PBOT in terms of anything that we can do that can slow people down and make the streets safer. We're all for it. So thank you, Byron. Thank you very much.
So I'm curious if we know if I've been a real advocate for the cameras that say your speed is, because I think 95% of people, when they realize they're speeding, just automatically slow down. I'd love to see some data that said, is the ticketing necessary? Do you get better results with giving people tickets than you do with just the warnings that actually tell people what their speed is? I'm not someone that thinks that we should just ticket people as a financial means to raise money for city services. So I would, before I would support any mass expansion of red cameras, I would certainly want to see real data that showed that yes, it does save lives. It does in fact consistently reduce speed. Because again, my experience has been once people know, because people like zone out when they're driving when it's not bumper to bumper traffic, but most people, once they know that they're speeding, they slow down immediately. So that would be my only that would be a question that I would have.
Thank
I
you.
think
Thank you.
that
I saw
the
Paul.
only thing I have to
Yeah.
say on that is that the those signs and speed cameras actually do help in terms of reducing speed and help with safety.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move on because we're at time really. So let's bring up the next presentation. Emmy. I want to try to get through all the presentations and also be respectful of everyone's time. So Emmy, you're up next. And Mulstree, can you pull up Emmy's presentation, please? Thank you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Great. So my name is Emmy. I'm talking today about creating and maintaining a universal transportation data hub. So I'm pretty new to the transportation world. I was curious as a bike commuter how decisions are made around what intersections are improved, who has jurisdiction over what areas, and what I guess infrastructure in the city, which is partially why I'm taking this class. I'm a UX researcher by trade, so data is kind of my world. So I wanted to look into how data is used, how is it collected to make informed decisions when improving infrastructure across the city for Portlanders. Next slide. So one thing I realized throughout this class is we had a lot of different speakers from different organizations come in and talk to us about their initiatives. And one thing I noticed is that a lot of them have their own initiatives for how they survey, how they collect data, what kind of data they're collecting, how often they're doing it. And oftentimes I think a lot of the organizations that came in, we're all marching towards the same goals, right? We want more equity for Portlanders to move across the city. We want to make informed decisions that improves infrastructure for the most amount of people to have the most effects in terms of improving safety. So what would it look like if we could combine all the different data collection efforts into a single source so that all organizations can leverage this data to make more informed decisions moving forward? So that's the first piece. The second piece is proactive periodic data gathering. So I noticed a lot of the surveys that are sent out now by PBOT or Metro or a number of different organizations, a lot of them are voluntary. So my proposal is to have more strategic surveying to target demographics in the city of people who might not be served well by infrastructure that we have today, just to drive more equity and ensure that those voices are heard as well. To make sure that there is a piece of data that accurately represents the citizens of Portland. Next slide. So why do this now? Obviously, COVID has changed how Portlanders move around the city. I think in the short term, definitely a lot of changes, but also in the long term, I think there's going to be some people who are teleworking more sustainably into the future. So by collecting this data now, we can keep all the groups informed, and decision-making can be more nimble, and we can kind of look towards more long-term plans and how we can use information like this to make decisions into the future as well. Next slide. So how we gather information today, this is a very quick snapshot, and I know there's a ton of more work that can be done here, but we look at US Census data. PBOT does a lot of work collecting information by project or by program, which is oftentimes neighborhood specific. TriMet has a lot of initiatives looking at long range impacts. So where are people living? Where are the schools? Where are people going to work? How are people moving across the cities? Bus service data, and then also the built environment around where the bus lines run, where rail stations are, what do those environments look like? And lastly, Metro has a lot of initiatives. The Regional Travel Options Program, they do a survey every few years to get insights on regional trends and transportation choices and seeing how that changes over time. They do have a transportation model, which uses a lot of surveying data and also a transportation demand inventory. And maps them all together, maps a lot of different programs together to understand how programs serve different parts of the city. Next slide. So there's actually a lot of work being done in Portland already. The Portland Urban Data Lake, or PUDDLE, is a pilot to collect, store, integrate, and analyze data from a variety of sources to provide a foundation for data-driven decision-making. So this would collect PBOT, TriMet, and Metro data together and use PUDDLE as like a hub to collect and analyze all of that quantitative data. Metro every few years works with a research team in Portland to conduct a survey and focus groups for Metro residents. And then lastly, the Portland Insights Survey is the Portland City Budget Office. This isn't transportation specific, but it does go a lot into the different insights of what people think of what it's like living in Portland. And I think transportation is a huge part of that as well. Next slide. So just in summary, we should leverage all of the existing data and efforts. There's a lot of work being done already from numerous different organizations. We should make this information accessible to everyone. And lastly, we should include a proactive periodic survey to ensure we get those results that represent the residents of Portland and allows for tracking changes in behaviors in transportation over time. Next slide. So I wanted to highlight a case study I found. So New York City has a pretty cool mobility survey. They've been doing annually since 2017. They survey 3,000 New Yorkers and they pick approximately 300 from each of the 10 areas or survey zones they've highlighted there. One thing I found interesting is they actually have like I think it's between a 2 or 3% respondent rate. So they send out a lot of surveys and purposely try to hit that 300 number for each of those regions they highlight there. Next slide. So in addition to kind of the qualitative report from that survey, all of the data is housed online in a website called New York City Open Data. So you can actually search for any of any survey reports, real-time traffic speed data. You'll see that screenshot there. I sorted it by the Department of Transportation in New York City. So they do have this hub where you can look up any information from any program that as a member of the public you can look up. One funny thing I found, there's a Central Park squirrel survey and they have the data in there as well. So if you're interested in squirrel migrations, that's also in there. And last slide. New York City was pretty nimble this year. They actually pivoted this mobility survey into 4 parts for 2020, realizing that COVID changed a lot of how people are moving around. So they took those the same participants, the 300 from each of those 10 areas, and they sent them the same survey 4 times in 2020. So spring, summer, and fall, I guess 3 times, to track how they've changed their behaviors in transportation over time. So I thought that was a really interesting way to survey participants and try to use a sample size to understand trends in how people are moving across the city. And I think that was my last slide. I just wanted to thank Michael. I reached out to him and he gave me so many resources from PBOT and a lot of other ones as well. So thank you, Michael.
Anytime, you're welcome.
Thank you, Emmy. I'm looking at time and all of a sudden we're like slipping into a 10-minute presentation. So I wanted to remind you that originally I asked for a 5-minute presentation so we can also have a discussion. But I also want to give the floor to Commissioner and Director, just really briefly, if you have a brief response to Emmy's presentation that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I guess a quick thing. Thank you, Emmy. This was great. I mean, what we have so much data at PBOT, and so trying to figure out how to use it and to make it something that is a valuable tool is hard. Some of the other data streams that we're looking at, like scooter data, rideshare data, we have the bike share data. So there's all sorts of data, and the puddle, and thank you. And it's something we're working on because we could just drown ourselves in data, but how do we use it, I think is the key tool. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask Emmy if who's responsible for making sure that the data stays up to date? Because I think that's always a challenge in making sure you have the most up-to-date data.
That's a good question. I imagine it would be whatever organization gathered the data, but yeah, there would definitely need to be comprehensive governance rules and kind of ownership structure around that as well.
Awesome research, very interesting. Next up is James. Mulsry, can you bring up James' presentation, please? And I'll hand the floor to James. Thank you.
Awesome. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Awesome, cool. I'm James. So my project is titled Improving West Burnside at Southwest 16, a learning approach. It is a learning approach because I'm someone who moved to Portland just about a year ago. I've actually spent more time in isolation than I have exploring Portland. So everything Portland is really a learning experience for me. So I decided to pick on a relatively local and a small traffic issue to focus on, especially since I'm still very unfamiliar with a lot of the neighborhoods. So in terms of my project, I live around the intersection of Burnside and Southwest 16 near Goose Hollow. And I've been through this intersection many, many times, both as a pedestrian and as a driver, and I've witnessed quite a few close calls. Perfect, Wall Street has my next slide on already. So the traffic problem. So what is traffic problem that we're tackling here? So you see my also very beautiful drawings and arrows. The two vertical-ish arrows going up and the one that's going down are both on 16th, and they both feed into Burnside, and then the two horizontal ones are just Burnside, the two-way street. So that's a normal traffic pattern. And so a lot of times, the traffic problem that I've seen is that a lot of drivers, as indicated in the red arrows, would feel the need to make a turn onto the one-way street southbound on 16th. And that is quite a dangerous thing. I've seen a couple of times, and my partner has also experienced it. And then two green dots are actually traffic lights that control Burnside. And for some reason, again, what really odd to me, some drivers don't really either completely miss that traffic light, or they stop very, very late as they notice it too late or something. And so really that is the traffic problem that I've noticed. Next slide, please. So my initial thoughts, I had three sort of ideas of what to do. The first, I thought about blocking off the intersection. See that big red bar there, blocking out the intersection. I've seen it in Northwest Cooch and 17th. That's just right up top, cut off by the map. There's like these large red cylinders blocking off the street there. I'm like, oh, that could be a good idea. The second thing I thought of was maybe we can change 16th, from a one-way street to a two-way street. I mean, the street is definitely wide enough, and cars already are treating it as a two-way, so might as well, right? And three, I thought about implementing maybe an entirely new traffic pattern, which I'm not really know how it looks like, but it was an idea. Next. So preferred solutions. So luckily for me, right before I picked this project and sort of started the course, I reported this particular intersection traffic concern to the PBOS 823 safe line. I did it through the online portal, and just as an average citizen, I suppose. And to my surprise, a couple weeks later, I don't remember how long actually, but a few kind folks at PBOT actually very helpfully took me seriously and responded to this particular concern and gave me some really awesome feedback and tangible actions to address this issue. Next. And so one of the solutions that we came to was visually separating the right turn traffic from left turn traffic. So if you're looking on Southwest 16th, and so the left picture on the yellow circle, you see how wide that entire left turn lane is. I think you can fit probably 3 cars there. So I mean, cars traveling down Burnside may think that you can actually turn up that street, even though it's a one-way. And then on the right, you can see the idea of creating a large painted median there, really separating the left turn and right turn traffic. So a really visual indicator that you shouldn't be doing that. So that's the first one. Next. So the second solution was to improve conflicting signage. So we're looking westbound Burnside. So in the middle red circle, we see a no turn sign. And then on the other 2 red circles on the left and on the right, they're both one-way signs that point at each other. They sort of cancel each other out. So they're basically also another no turn sign. So it's conflicting, a little confusing. And there's, I believe that there's a design standard that could have improved this. Next. And this one, lastly, this is my personal favorite, and it's restoring angled parking. Now we're looking northbound on Southwest 16. And restoring angled parking, I think it really would discourage drivers from turning onto the street, as it really takes up a large portion of the street. What's funny is that I actually took this, one night, about 2 nights ago, I heard lots of noise outside, and I was like, wait, they're painting angled parking. And so I took this picture the day after, and I was like, look at this. They actually, it actually happened just in time for this presentation. This is the last of the 3 preferred solutions that I have, and they're relatively simple and uncomplicated fixes. So to me, as someone who is not involved with traffic planning, these honestly aren't things that, simple fixes that I would have came up on by myself. So it was really interesting learning that these are sort of preferred solutions, as opposed to me thinking that I should block off the entire street. So next. The next component is resiliency and equity. This was really a tough component for me to consider. But thinking about the themes of this course, I sort of had a couple ideas how we can integrate it with this project. Next. So in terms of resiliency, we have to think about the Burnside Lifeline route. So Burnside Bridge, including all of Burnside Street itself, functions as the region's emergency route. So when the time comes, not if, but when, that a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake strikes, this route will serve to connect East and West Portland. And although I've done some research, and it looks like the main focus really is on the seismic readiness of Burnside Bridge, but I personally believe that maintaining the entire route will be a contributing factor to the resilience of Portland during the Cascadia subduction zone event, or whichever ones come thereafter. Next, please. So lastly, we have our equity component. Even though our intersection in question only saw one crash between 2014 and 2018, it is part of Portland's high crash network, actually. So that being said, given the implementation of our solution was relatively simple, and with some of the parts done, like the restoration of angled parking on 16th. This project, I feel that personally, it really does benefit a lot of different groups in the neighborhood, as they traverse the streets around it and this particular intersection. And it is my belief, and I hope some of you may also believe this, that complete and safe streets are indeed equitable streets. Next. All right, key takeaways. I can be very brief with this. I have a few key takeaways. One, building resiliency and equity into traffic and transportation projects is not easy. Two, I was actually personally really impressed with the robustness of Portland's vision and resiliency planning. There is a lot of things that are being done or have done or planned or in motion that I was really impressed with. And three, I was really surprised that my voice was actually heard. I wasn't actually expecting responses and real tangible things to be done. So I was really, really surprised by that. Next. And that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. If it's okay, I'm going to hold comments because we're really short on time. I apologize. So the presentations are going way much longer than I expected, but let's get started with the next one, which is Josh. Commissioner and Director, if it makes sense, we could put some comments into the chat in response to some of the presentation. I think it just gives us some time. Mulser, can you bring up Josh's presentation? I just want to make sure that we end in a timely manner, but please, I appreciate your presentation. I think it was really cool. Good analysis. Could you bring up Josh's? And Josh, I'll hand you the floor.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So mine is on a better bike connection between Brooklyn and Selwood. Next slide. So right now, the two neighborhoods are close by. They're close neighbors, but it's difficult to travel between them by bike. They form sort of an hourglass shape, and Brooklyn's on the north, Selwood's on the south, and they funnel through this pinch point in the middle on Milwaukee Ave and 17th Ave. And you can see by the Portland's bike map, these red dashed lines showing a difficult connection, which very much mirrors my own experience here. You have a pretty difficult time on either one of those. 17th Ave has some bike facilities, but you have to cross at grade on like an 8-lane highway across McLaughlin Boulevard, which is just not approachable for nearly anyone. And Milwaukee Ave has no bike facilities. It's a narrower, tamer street, but there's a curve, there's some decent amount of traffic, so it's pretty tough to get through there. Next slide. So I decided to look at this segment here from roughly Holgate, the mall just north of that, down to Reedway, and really narrow in on that area, right around that overpass over McLaughlin on Milwaukee Ave. The reason for this area is that there are lower stress parallel routes to Milwaukee Ave and 17th Ave on the north end in Brooklyn and on the south end in Selwood. So the idea is, fix this pinch point so you can get through this pinch point and then safely move to quieter streets if that's what you need. Next pass. Next slide, please. One more. So I looked at a range of options, and I have a written proposal where I kind of go into more detail, but the A1, gold star would be put in protected bike lanes the whole way through. And it's definitely the one that would move the needle most on mode share. It's difficult because you would have to remove nearly all the parking on this entire stretch of Milwaukee Ave. And I think that's ultimately maybe a long-term goal. The 2030 bike plan has something similar to that, but this is sort of a look at what do we do if we can't do everything, right out of the gate? What can we do to move this appreciably forward? And so it's kind of a mix of things we'll still be using targeted protected bike lanes in some of the most important parts, but then it's complemented by things like traffic calming and improved sidewalks and so forth throughout there. which improves biking implicitly, but also specifically gives you sort of a more multimodal corridor, not just for biking. Next slide, please. So the real centerpiece of this would be these protected bike lanes on the McLaughlin Ave overpass on Milwaukee Ave. It turns out it's actually really wide. There's something like a 20-foot wide lane on the one side, and the other side has parking that's really not used much. So there's plenty of room to put in a high quality protected bike lane here. And that also gives you a nice visual sort of centerpiece to this. It gives you much higher visibility of biking on Milwaukee because it's basically invisible now. A few fearless riders do it, but not many. And then it also provides, this is close to the Oaks Bottom Trail access. So it gives you a nice high quality entrance to that off-street path as well. And it also includes access through this corridor, but also to the businesses and residents that live in that corridor. That pinch point right in the middle there, there's businesses, there's a donut shop, there's a tap room, and it's hard to get to those places safely now. And my version of a 20-minute neighborhood includes a donut shop. So I think everyone should be able to, get there safely. Next slide, please. So in addition to that, the protected bike lane where we can make it work, start looking at things like, okay, where we can't install a full protected bike lane, let's remove a little bit of parking to make some space, but try and take advantage of things like existing curb cuts and existing bus stops. So that way, maybe we only have to remove 3 or 4 spaces. We get a whole block face of, freed up space at a time. So trying to be respectful there and let us build towards a more robust version in the future. And start doing things like adding signage for bikes in lane and things like that that are going to start raising the visibility of bikes in that corridor. And also get a bike corral parking to daylight the intersection at Schiller, but also to provide parking. Next slide, please.
Quick question, Josh. Hey, yes. Josh, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Isn't there that little circle there? Do you use that?
I don't. That's just south of what I showed on the map there. It's right by the Oaks Bottom. I did a bike count there project actually a year ago, 2 years ago. A lot of people do pass through it, but not the way you'd expect. They sort of follow their own rules as you go through.
Yeah, I was wondering. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. One thing I did here was this is showing the sidewalk south of Oaks Bottom on Milwaukee Ave. And there are a lot of permanent obstructions on the sidewalk, which is a barrier for less confident riders who might just take the sidewalk on their bike, but also obviously wheelchair users, anyone with a cargo bike or a tag along. The picture on the left are the actual conditions. The picture on my right is a ham-fisted Photoshop job, but you can already breathe a lot easier looking at that. It looks like a sidewalk now. So I think working with utilities in the city to move those obstructions would really open up a low stress option here for walking and rolling into Sellwood. And there's also some spots in this corridor with some really uneven sidewalks that we can just fix those up to continue to improve this. Next slide. And then lastly, couple this with things like lowering the speed limit, adding some better crossings, and improving the bus stops to mainly stop in lane so that transit could get a little bit speedier, and also the bike lanes can continue through the bus stops where possible. So that way we don't have such patchwork bike lanes kind of interrupted every 300 feet. If we can get them to continue through the bus stops in this corridor, I feel like that would go a long way. This is also, I believe this segment's also in one of the Rose Lane kind of delay segments that they're targeting soon. So it's already slated for some transit improvements as it is. So next slide. So then long-term, you can see the 2030 bike plan is, they have facilities on Milwaukee Ave, on 17th Ave. So it's really just working towards that longer-term plan. Like, what can we do now that's going to build, get us a little closer to this, and try and build it in a way that's going to connect to things we know are coming, like say the Reedway overpass or better greenways in Brooklyn, and make sure that these changes align with those. So that way we're kind of priming ourselves for the future. So, next.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. I am going to hold questions and comments for anybody, Director or Commissioner, if you want to put that in the chat. I'm going to try to make some headway, and we're going to end up taking our own breaks, just so that I want to make sure that we end on time. Mulsri, can you bring up Carrie's presentation? Carrie, you are next. That was great. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm traveling through Portland, even though I'm not, which is kind of cool. Carrie, you're up next. And Malsri, if you can bring up her presentation, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Josh and I want to be able to visit each other. We live very close to each other, but we can't get there. Anyway, yeah, I decided to look at bus routes, which is interesting, so I'm a cyclist, but I wanted to look at time savings and some resiliency issues around bus routes going north-south across Portland instead of, right now we route all our commuters through downtown. My name's Carrie Leonard, by the way. So can I have the next slide? So the problem is on an 11-mile commute from Selwood to University Park, it takes roughly 30 to 90 minutes in a private car, 70 to 90 minutes currently via transit, and transit requires at least one transfer, but sometimes two, and you have to be able to walk quite a bit. And then it takes 45 minutes by bicycle if you're a strong cyclist. And it's also not, the transit route is not very resilient because you have to cross the river 2 times as well as it taking longer. So the simple solution from my perspective was that if we can route some of the bus route, one of the bus routes to not cross the river and instead leverage the new Rose lanes that are going in on MLK, on Grand, but then you can go all the way up Grand to MLK. Right now, this is a little hard because I don't have the mouse, so I was going to use the mouse, but the 6 runs up and down Grand, but then it turns and it crosses the river at the Hawthorne Bridge. So there's no, and then the 70 goes up on Southeast 11th, but then it makes it like a right and it starts to head east once it crosses I-84. So there's no connection that goes from about Division or even Powell all the way up and continues up MLK. So that continues kind of to bear west. But if you were able to just get one bus that goes and crosses Sullivan's Gulch and stays west, stays to the left, and then you can transfer after you cross Sullivan's Gulch, and then you would actually have a pretty reliable 45-minute commute time from deep southeast Portland to all the way up to North Portland. And then that gets you comparable easily to a bicycle, but it also makes it realistically comparable to a car. One of the big issues is the state is proposing to spend $500 to $750 million to deal with congestion on the I-5 Rose Quarter. And a lot of that congestion is due to local traffic. If we can try to get options that are not unreasonable for people to get out of their cars to get through this area, and this is one possible way to do it, is to make the transit more accessible. Turn to the next slide, please. Part of my big question here, and this is, I thought Emmy's talk was really interesting because my question that I never got an answer to, because I don't know if there is an answer, I think it's a PhD research actually, not this class. Does the data drive the bus routing decisions, or does it confirm our biases? Are we confirming our biases that most people work in downtown Portland and we have to get everybody there? Or instead, especially with COVID, can we use this as an opportunity to look at where are people really going when they ride the bus? And do we need to get everybody downtown? Can I have the next slide, please? This is a really poor image that I took from one of Metro's reports, and looking at where Portland residents work and how they commute. And I wanted to focus on Multnomah County, where 66% of the people stay in Multnomah County who live here. And to me, that points to, again, more options and more resiliency for just getting around inside of the city itself. And the next slide, please. So I did talk to TriMet, and one of the things I learned is that actually from TriMet's view, bus routes are fixed routes, which I found fascinating from a worldview standpoint, because I don't consider a bus route to be a fixed route. It seems to me like it's something that's pretty flexible. But I also learned that people are very possessive about their bus stop or their bus route. And you start messing with people's bus routes and you get community uproar really fast. It's almost as much as taking away some parking spaces. But bus routes are really flexible by design. And I want to reference this Stephen Higashide, who is actually speaking tomorrow at the Trek symposium. I'm going to put in a plug for Trek there, who's done a lot of work with Better Buses, Better Cities. And one of the things that are always touted with bus routes is that you can move them. It's not rail. If we want to get to the mode share and we want to try to get people out of their cars, their individual cars, I think we need to be thinking bigger picture metro-wise and really look at the assumptions we're making about where we're thinking people need to go. The other assumption is that we're looking at how and where people work, and I think that that's often done through implicit bias, through a gender racial lens. Carolyn Criado Perez has done some great research on when you flip a lot of urban planning on its head and you just design from the standpoint of how do women move around the world, you actually end up with a really different system in terms of, there's a great study out of Norway about snow removal and where you choose to do snow removal and the impact that has on people, on safety, and also who can still get where they need to go even if you're not removing the major commute routes. So I kind of ended up with more questions than answers with my project, but I definitely think our decision to route most of our major commute routes through downtown impacts many people's choices in how they get around Portland.
Thank you, Carrie. I think these are great Christmas gift books from Powell. Should go to Powell and buy one. This is awesome. Again, let's do comments as we can into the chat. I think it's great. I've got Chris and Joanne putting comments on there. Love the presentation. Next up is Karen. Malsri, can you bring up Karen's presentation?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, thank you.
Well, just like Carrie, I really generated so many more questions with my project idea than I thought I would. But I really want to look and see if we were defining and measuring safety in communities, and I put health in as a question mark because wondering if that is included in our measure of safety. So next slide. I wanted to look at what the safety indicators and measures were that PBOT is using and explore other safety indicators to consider and provide recommendations for safety indicators. And the next slide shows the PBOT, the first goal for PBOT, which is to make Portland streets safe for everyone, including making the high crash networks safer, getting drivers to slow down, using data and technology to make systems safer, and to make safety a core priority. And then the next two slides are really just the indicators that PBOT has listed as ways to get at those objectives. And when I was looking at these indicators and diving into what best practices are for measuring safety, PBOT does have a lot of them included and is doing a good job. And what, next slide, please. Next slide. And just like with any data, I'm not a transportation person, just really, you know, learning all the limitations, and it becomes really complicated really quickly. And really became clear that you need to use lots of different indicators in different ways in conjunction with each other to start getting these pictures and to really define what safety is. Next slide, please. And what really caught my interest about safety and the definition of safety is, as someone who's concerned with health, safety in transportation seems to be defined as injury or fatality related and not necessarily health promoting. And so I just wondered why that was. And it was very interesting in looking at this. In the 80s, it sounds like health programs and safety programs really diverged and went in separate directions rather than looking at what is a safe community, being a safe and healthy community. They're both really important, but they kind of separated from each other and went in different directions. And so, like with a lot of things, a comprehensive safe community has strategic systems approach that integrates engineering, design, enforcement, and public health approaches that include these quantifiable objectives, regular measurement of progress, and regular reporting to the communities that are involved and policymakers for making decisions. And a lot of the issues that come with that is these are different agencies, these are different organizations, these organizations have different accountability, different measures, different objectives. And so I really liked Emmy's presentation with this data hub, and I'd like to throw some more data into that hub to help round out this full picture. And how do we define safety for all ages and abilities, gender, race, anything, so that we're making sure that people in our communities feel safe and have health. And so again, it was a huge issue, huge undertaking to look at. And so I just kind of wanted to focus on some of the health issues that I know are directly related specifically to physical activity. So next slide, please. These are the leading causes of death in Oregon. They're cancer, heart disease, lung disease, unintentional injuries, stroke, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and alcohol-induced deaths. All of these really are related to transportation and to physical activity. And so and all of these are also major risk factors for complications from COVID. So if wondering, how are we safe if we have one of these conditions, we are at more risk for not only these conditions, but even just being more susceptible to COVID. Next slide, please. And physical activity, we all know that it's important. It is really kind of this miracle drug in that the more that you have, the healthier you are. And it is just an integral part of everyone's health and mental health, physical health, and safety. And walking and rolling is the most popular form of physical activity for people. And 50% of people who actually meet what the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommend for physical activity are people who walk or roll for exercise, and people who use active transportation meet those recommendations quite easily. And 10% of all deaths are attributable to physical inactivity as an independent risk factor in itself. Next slide, please. And so I was just thinking about what are some other measures that we could include that are available, that have maybe other data sources, other organizations that could contribute this information that could help us round out the picture for safety in our communities. And two that really come directly related to transportation safety, again, are physical inactivity and excessive alcohol use. And again, this chart just shows how they're directly related to each of those conditions. Next slide, please. And so I just wanted to show, just here are some data that are available right here in Multnomah County. There are different age and racial breakdowns of these data that can be used, and partnering with health agencies or health organizations are ways to hopefully get at, what are these important issues for communities and how can we use this information to round out what is considered a safe community. And again, health and safety are so all-encompassing. It's air quality, it's climate change, it's economic stability, all of that. But just how do we start pulling all of these different threads together to have a better picture? And I think what's difficult for agencies like PBOT, for example, is of course PBOT is not going to be responsible for the binge drinking prevalence in a community, but that has a very strong correlation to traffic safety in a community. So how do we form those collaborations with agencies to not only have the data, but also plan what to do with it and to align our objectives for safety. And the last slide is just, again, a safe community is one that promotes safety and health and manages risk, where the community is the leader in determining what the priorities are, but also helping to shape what those measures are and to make sure that there's regular reporting back on what these indicators are and if we are making progress or not. And I think that the data hub is a great idea to help make these data more accessible and to paint just a better picture overall rather than siloed organizations. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's so imperative, so very important, so very important. And I think COVID does a really good job of allowing us this opportunity to rethink a lot of priorities. I think I've made headway. I feel like a pilot or a drill sergeant every year like this. But we are actually really good in time. And let's take a 5-minute break because I think we all need to get up and do a stretch. Come back at 8:10. We have just 2 more presentations. And after the last 2 presentations, we can all come together and actually have a really good group discussion. So I'll see you in 5 minutes.
I think you have 3 more presentations.
Oh, 3 more?
Yep.
Megan and Michael. No, actually, I think I only have 2 more. I'll confirm it. I think I only have 2 more. I think the other person who was going to present couldn't make it.
Students disagreeing. So good. We'll know when we come back in 5.
Okay. Thank you. This has been awesome. Hey, Malsri, I think we only have 2 more, right? I can even share it with you too if you want. I think it's kind of fun. Yeah, and we did kind of an international component too. So I allowed students to also share photos from their international travels or lived experience elsewhere. So we do just have 2 presentations left. And the reason is because Mariah, who is here, it will not be presenting, unfortunately. Maybe next year you'll come back and present. See that Phil has his hand raised. Phil, do you want to ask a quick question?
Yeah, I would love to. If we haven't reconvened, and feel free to defer or punt on it. But Commissioner Joanne and Director Chris, thanks for coming. It's awesome to have you. And I would love to hear your thoughts at some time now or tonight on, like, we've heard a lot of good ideas. They all cost money. When I was doing the midterm, I learned this, there's this massive unfunded maintenance amount for basically all of the infrastructure in the city and everywhere. So I wanted to hear your thoughts. Like, do you foresee there's a great reckoning coming where we will have to do something, or a Cascadia event causes some massive federal injection of money? Or can we just keep chugging along because that's what we've always done and there's always been cost constraints?
So you don't have to answer that right now, huh?
Let's, can you hold on? Can you hold on? Is that okay? Or do you want to answer it? Let's hold on. I really want to get through the
question.
Yeah, that's fine.
I will just start by saying, we cannot continue to defer the enormous. I think it's I'm not going to give you a number because I just heard it today, but I'm not remembering it exactly. But it is a significant, tens of millions of dollars and significantly in millions of dollars in delayed infrastructure improvements. Um, we're going to have to make some hard choices. There are some places that I would not support us putting money into because the amount of money we'd have to put into it would not actually give us a good return on investments. And there are other places that I think we should prioritize, right? The reality is local governments never have all the resources they need. That's just the reality of living within a budget that you are forced to balance every year. Not unlike the federal government, who can just not balance their budget. Uh, my big hope is that if we have a functional federal government after the next election that takes place in Georgia, then it is my hope that we will have a huge infrastructure improvement legislation that comes down that actually gives us the resources to prioritize what are the most significant investments we could make that would serve the city well for the next 100+ years. So that's what I'll be looking for. But if we don't have a functional federal government, heaven help us all.
True. Very, very true. Very true. Okay, let's get back to our presentation. Thank you. Thank you so much for answering that question. And even asking that question, I think is very important, Phil. Megan, you are up, and Malsri, can you bring up Megan's presentation, please?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here to listen to my presentation. I didn't put my name on it. I just realized once everybody else did that I probably should have. But anyway, a vibrant city using street art and lighting under the I-84 overpass on Northeast 122nd Avenue in Portland. Next slide, please. Buenos Aires has had many murals done under overpasses, and I thought it was a wonderful idea to do the same thing here. Martin Ron is one of the artists that has done the murals under the underpasses and overpasses, sorry, in Buenos Aires, and it's a good example of what I'm trying to portray here. R.V. Smith and Mayron Hurd did murals at the Natural Grocery Store building in inner Northeast Portland. And it would be cool to see them do something similar in this project. Next slide, please. I would like to see artists or other local artists do murals in this area and add lighting to make it a better place for pedestrians and bicyclists to use. Currently, it is very dark and could use some brightening up, especially at nighttime. There's also a staircase that isn't far from there that you see pictured that leads up to the Parkrose Heights neighborhood. And I figured why not add some color to this area as well while we're at it. This location is a crossroads of 4 different neighborhoods: Parkrose, Argay Terrace, Parkrose Heights, and Russell. Next slide, please. Street art and lighting in this area are important for many reasons. With a better visibility and a feeling of safety, it will make people feel more comfortable to use this path. Not only will it help bridge the gap that severed all 4 of these neighborhoods back in 1956 when the I-84 freeway was built, it could also bring community together by working to complete the mural and promote local artwork. Next slide, please. All the Parkrose School District schools are very close to this location, more specifically the Parkrose Heights and Russell neighborhoods that have middle school and high school school-age children that could be more likely to use this path when improvements are done. Next slide. The census data from 2010, if you minus the 10 and 19-year-olds, account for potentially 1,189 children that live in the Parkrose Heights and Russell neighborhoods that could use this path when coming home from middle school and high school after school activities. Obviously, when the COVID stuff all settles down, we can go back to school. Portland Equity Matrix shows more data that is important. These 4 neighborhoods have more people of color and lower income levels on average than the rest of the city. With those 2 factors combined, it causes for a higher overall equity matrix score. And then the biggest non-English proficiencies in this area are Vietnamese and Spanish speaking peoples. When looking at this data, it really helps to determine where projects are prioritized in the city. And then if anybody's wondering, the reason why there's two different numbers for Park Rose Heights, because the equity matrix map split it in. I'm not sure what that reason is. Next slide, please. Figuring out the stakeholders are crucial to the success of this project. It is important to get the opinions of everyone involved before starting. Working across all jurisdictions is equally important so that everyone is on the same page. I have made a list of potential stakeholders, which include community members, neighborhood associations, the school district, PBOT, ODOT, etc. Next slide, please. Portland has city codes and guidelines in place for art murals. It is my plan that the mural follow these guidelines, that it's of the right size, that it will remain in place and not be altered for 2 years, and that the mural location is not in a design overlay zone. The mural will not violate any prohibited ordinances. The mural will not be on any residential buildings, historic or conservation landmarks, and will not give anyone compensation for having it on their property. Next slide, please. PBOT prioritizes where to update their lighting by looking at the equity matrix. Any developments made need to follow the city lighting standards. When PBOT updates lighting, it is also up to the permittee to pay full cost of the street lighting project. The cost per fixture is $124, but it could potentially cost like $992 for a total of 8 lights. Next slide, please. I spoke with Tim, Corey, and Ryan from ODOT, and they said that the current lighting under the I-84 overpass is very old, and that their plans to update it with LED lighting. They would want to wait until those improvements are made before considering to add additional lighting. And then after ODOT reviews and approves the project, they would initiate an intergovernmental agreement with the local government. ODOT has done projects like this in the past and requested that a local artist guide community involvement in the mural to allow for a smoother process. Next slide, please. ODOT provided a highway division directive document that provided insight to what is necessary for them to have artwork project approved in their jurisdiction and property. Safety is their main concern, especially in terms of distracted motorists. But the document also spoke of content on the mural and who would maintain it and who would have to pay for it. Examples include no bold or vibrant colors. Local government must have a public review process for proposed mural, and mural must be maintained and paid for by the local government. Next slide, please. The project is going to have many challenges, but hopefully many solutions as well. Funding, participation, and working across different organizations are going to be the main challenges for the success of this project. If everyone works together, helps out, and communicates, there will be a beautiful mural to look at on 122nd. Next slide, please. And thanks for your time. Any questions or comments?
Lovely. I think we are due for some really good visuals. I think many of us, if not all of us, are visual people. Art is very important. Let's hold these. I think we do have some more time later. So let's go to the last presentation for the night, which is Michael Mann-Malsry. Can you bring up Michael's presentation? And here we go.
Awesome, thank you. Hey, it was interesting to see that Ashley, our first presenter, that this was on her list of ideas, and she deferred, although she stuck with the Ankeny Davis Bikeway. I'm going to focus on the intersection of 60th and Davis towards the east end of the bikeway, and you can go to the next slide. And you can see the bikeway there highlighted, and an arrow pointing to the intersection I'm talking about. Next slide. And my idea, because I grew up and worked in East County, and I live east of 82nd, and I'm aware that bike commuting from east of 82nd is problematic, and there's a number of reasons for that, and some of those are cultural, and I'm not addressing that, but We have too few east-west greenways. The bike lanes on Burnside and Stark, which is really the center of East County getting into Portland, those are narrow and dangerous, and really, unless you're an advanced cyclist, you're probably not going to tackle them. We have some recent infrastructure improvements in East County. East County's been getting a lot of attention for greenways and bike lanes, but they're discontinuous. They don't go all the way into the city core. So Halsey, Gleason, Powell, Holgate, and Foster have all seen recent improvements, but they don't go all the way in. They pretty much end 82nd, 205, that area. So addressing equity and equitable transportation means that those who are living east of 82nd need prioritized and safe options to access central Portland. As was mentioned earlier, we don't want to have that bias that everybody works downtown, but we also don't want to have barriers to people being able to work downtown. Next slide. So kind of an overview of the Ankeny-Davis Bikeway. It is the major east-west greenway that parallels East Burnside, and it does connect East County and Gresham to the central east side via the Burnside bike lane. It is the only east-west greenway between Salmon, which is about a mile south, and Tillamook, which is about a mile north. So it funnels a pretty big area. And there's a number of barriers, as was mentioned earlier, one of them, but we have busy intersections that cyclists need to cross at 60th, at 47th, at Cesar Chavez, at 28th, and at Sandy. Next slide. So I'm focusing on one of those, and that's the 60th and Davis. And you can see the map here, there's some issues. 60th is a high traffic street. And part of the reason for that is because the on-ramp to I-84 is accessed via 60th. And so if you live between 82nd and 39th and you're trying to get to the freeway, you're probably going to take 60th. And so at certain times of the day, there's a lot of traffic traveling on that street. I tried to get traffic counts on that and I couldn't find them. I found the traffic count website, but it didn't mention traffic counts for 60th. And I was specifically looking for between Burnside and Gleason, which is where this is located. And Davis crosses, as you can see, it crosses at a weird angle. So if you're a cyclist or pedestrian crossing there, it's actually a longer crossing for you because of that angle. Also, on the right side of that diagram there, if you're a cyclist heading westbound, you're coming down about a 5 or 6 block long hill. So you can be reaching that stop sign at a pretty high rate of speed. And the closest north-south through street, so if you're a motorist, if you're using 60th or you're using 82nd, which is more than a mile to the east, or 47th to the west. Next slide. And this is just a couple visuals to kind of give you an idea of what I'm looking at here. On the left side there, that would be a driver's perspective looking southbound if you're driving on 60th. And the right side, that would be a cyclist perspective looking uphill if you're heading eastbound on Davis. And you can see that it makes a jog there as the arrow indicates. Next slide. So my proposal is to prioritize this and make it so that drivers coming through there are a little bit more aware that this is a greenway, because right now it's not as obvious as it could be. And one of those would be to just put some green stripes and put a cross bike in there. It extends, there's a sidewalk there or a crosswalk there already. So this would make it indicate for a cyclist and for a motorist that it is a greenway. So it directs crossing cyclists and alerts drivers to the bike crossing. Average cost on those that I was able to find is about $750 to $2,500, depending on the number and the type of actual treatment that you're using. And this photo is of the cross bike that's at 15th and Tillamook. Some of you are probably familiar with that. Next slide. And recommending RRFBs, rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Those are becoming more used, and as you can see in this photo here, Those are activated by pedestrians or cyclists, and they can be solar powered as well. Next slide. Advantages to the RRFBs, they have been shown by the Federal Highway Administration. They can reduce crashes by up to 47%. They're easily activated by cyclists and pedestrians, so they're not flashing if somebody didn't push the button for it. They cost between about 12 to 25K to install. That's total cost, including labor. Can be solar powered, as I said, and they're familiar to drivers. They're familiar to pedestrians and cyclists. So there's not a steep learning curve on this. Next slide. So conclusion, the intersection has just recently, as was mentioned earlier, had some improvements. So there's curb extensions there, and there are crosswalks just painted last month. But drivers are still regularly ignoring pedestrians and cyclists who wait to cross. I see it on a daily basis. There's longer wait times, and when you're waiting and it's traffic, you sometimes engage in riskier behavior to try to dash across. Traffic on 60th is a posted 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. It's regularly exceeding that. So the addition of pedestrian activated rapid response beacons and green stripe cross bikes would prioritize vulnerable users at that intersection. Total cost would be about between 13 and 28,000. And this one improvement, this is just one intersection on that greenway, but trying to smooth active transportation route from East County downtown. This is one barrier to people being able to use that route effectively, and this would help a lot. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you very much. These are great projects. We have a good 10 minutes. I'd love to bring us together and have just a quick discussion on what your thoughts have been through the last couple of presentations, and what can we do? What can we implement? What's possible? So I'll let you have the floor.
I think she's talking to you and I, Chris, or yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, these are great. I mean, one of the things that I guess I'll just do kind of a quick pitch that kind of the transportation world that at least we're dealing with now. And I think that the commissioner identified kind of the deferred maintenance is a huge problem for us. We have a system that is, you know, over 100 years old. You know, people don't know we have 150 bridges in the city of Portland that we have jurisdiction over, and it's none of the ones over the Willamette. So we have a huge deferred maintenance backlog. But one of the ways that it's just kind of the vagaries of the way we fund things as a society is it's easier for us to get money for new things than it is to take care of the things that we have. So for instance, we're going to be opening 2 new bridges in the city of Portland: the pedestrian bridge, the Earl Blumenauer Bridge over I-84, and the Flanders Crossing across I-405. And we're not using any of our virtually none of our general transportation dollars for that. We had system development charges that we have to use for expansion and we can't use for maintenance. We got a Connect Oregon grant from the state in order. There's some money from one of the urban renewal areas that's helping to pay for it. So we're going to have these great facilities, which we're very happy for because it's going to really help with the connectivity, particularly for bike and pedestrians, and it'll actually create 2 overcrossings over the freeway that will be seismically sound for emergency vehicles. So we're excited about that. But then the general transportation revenue that we get from parking revenue and from the gas tax, which really funds most of the work that we do for deferred maintenance, you know, that's a kind of a declining revenue source at this point. So it's one of the challenges that we have in terms of how do we continue to do the work. So we've done we're really focused on where we can get the most really bang for our buck in terms of the projects that kind of meet, somebody was talking about kind of the equity matrix that we're working on to make sure we're using our equity matrix to make sure we make those right investments. Also, sometimes you'll say, well, why are you tearing up that road as opposed to one that's worse? So sometimes if we fix a road before it gets into disrepair, then that will save us money down the line. Some of the roads that are really bad and they take a total rebuild, we just can't afford to do that. So sometimes it doesn't seem like it's complete logic on why we make some of these investment decisions, but it really is based on kind of return on investment and trying to make sure that we kind of stop digging in terms of our deferred maintenance and kind of the backlog that we have. So that's why I love this field that we have. There's so many challenges and there's so many opportunities to, you know, even if you think, well, that road isn't, you know, what it should be, but we're also, as a lot of you have said, with just small projects, we can really make a difference for Portlanders. And that's the thing that really kind of gets me going. So all these presentations were wonderful in terms of really bringing forward some really great ideas. Some of these we've thought of and some of these we probably haven't. So I'm just encouraged when I see so many smart people taking time out of your day to try to, you know, kind of live what I live every day. So thank you so much for sharing this with me, because I'm so pleased. I'm really gratified when you say I called the PBOT staff and they got back to me. You know, that makes me so happy. So thank you so much for making my day on that one.
Yeah, directors love hearing that, right? Like, what? You got to respond.
Absolutely.
They were positive and they were trying to be helpful, right? That's exactly what we strive to do. And let me just say that from the day I showed up at City Hall, I said, you know, the way we fund things are just stupid, right? What we should figure out is, who are we, right? What is it that every Portlander should expect from their city government? We should figure that out first, get our list, and then say, how do we pay for it, right? Because what we do today, even pre-COVID, made no sense to me, right? Just as a layperson who has spent 30 plus years advocating at City Hall, it just didn't make sense to me. And the more I've gotten into it, the less sense it makes, right? So I do think that we have opportunities, again, coming out of this these crises that we're in at the moment, to really start having that conversation. And let me give you something to make you giggle. Next year, I will be the senior commissioner on the city council, the mayor being the only one with more time in office than myself, right? So, and I've been there a whole 2 years next month, right? So, right? And I say that to say that's really good news, right? Because in January, the majority of the city council will be people who come from grassroots community. They're not career politicians. They're not people who ran because they wanted to be governor one day, right? These are people who are deeply vetted in the community and really care about the people that the city of Portland serve, right? So I think there'll be more people that think like me. Well, gee, that didn't make sense. Why do we keep doing that, right? There'll be more people that think like me on the city council, and less people that say, well, we have to do it that way because that's the way we've always done it. Because I heard that for my first year on the city council, right? And that didn't work for my mom, and it certainly doesn't work for me on a regular basis when somebody tells me that. Um, I want to echo Chris. I think the creativity, the thoughtfulness that all of you used in your presentations, and the really forward thinking about how people use this space. Some of the intersections that you talked about and some of the locations are locations that I've had the exact same opinion when I showed up in those locations and thought, somebody ought to do something about that, right? Let me say advocacy matters. Being able to reach out and talk to your elected leaders. We don't know who will be the commissioner in charge of PBOT next year yet, but whoever that will be, I will just say you need 3 votes to do anything on city council. And so talk to the transportation commissioner, but don't just talk to them, because you need 2 more votes in order to make something happen. But what I know is thoughtful, community-driven proposals that come with community support have a much better shot at getting city support than things that people just come in and yell and jump up and down and scream at us and demand we do something, right? The fact that you've taken the time to be thoughtful helps a lot. I also want to echo what Chris said. There are many, many, many opportunities for your engagement coming up at the City of Portland next year. The Charter Review Commission has just been appointed today. They will be looking at the city charter. Maybe they will look at the question of how we finance our basic needs at the City of Portland. That might be a very good conversation to have over the next 2 years. We'll also be putting other boards and commissions together. So I would just encourage you, whatever drives your passion, look for it on our website, my Facebook page and PBOT's website, and plug in, because nothing makes more of an impact than concerned community members who volunteer their time to help us get it right. So thank you all. I've been inspired, and you all are very impressive with the work you've done. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for closing us out. This is fantastic. We're so honored. We're so happy to have you both here, and Aaron as well, to be with us, to share this time tonight, to go through these projects. I think is very, we're very lucky to have your presence.
Back at you. We're very lucky to have community members who actually would volunteer their time to come to a PBOT class and actually take it seriously and develop their own proposals, right? There's nothing beats that, right? I'm here because you asked me to come, and I go where people ask me to go when I can. But you guys didn't have to be here, and the work that you've done really reflects your passion for the City of Portland.
Thank you. I couldn't have said it better. This is lovely. Thank you so much. Can I get a round of applause from everyone?
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you. Great job, everybody. Great job.
Great job.
Thank you. Yeah. Good night.
Good night.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Well,
stay safe.
Bye-bye. Be
Take
safe.
Care.